led today by Francisco Navarro. Francisco Navarro.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. I've been given the honor of doing the opening meditation today for you. My name is Francisco Nava, and I'm very happy to be here today. I'd like to ask that you all get comfortable in your seats and take a few deep breaths, cleansing breaths, just to settle down. And then I'd like to ask you to close your eyes and follow me on this guided meditation. Imagine yourself on the uppermost ridge of our beautiful Sierra Madre Mountains. You see our Lake Chapala in the distance. The peace in the mountain forest is total, and you are aware of small animals around you. You see and hear rabbits and squirrels romping, and you can hear the sounds of more birds hidden in the canopy of the trees. You hear the sound of running water beside you, and you can tell that the water is gentle, and you walk in the direction of that sound. As you walk, you can feel the leaves under your feet, and the small branches and roots in the ground. It feels good to have your feet touching Mother Earth, and you let the gentle voice of the water call you on. Shortly, in front of you, opens a little clearing in the foliage, and in the middle of the clearing is the lake shore. The lake is being fed from a stream cascading down a small rocky slope. And as the lake is filled to overflowing, you stop and take in the sight. It is breathtaking. The sun is just rising over the eastern end of the lake. It is one of those spectacular sunrises, full of goldens, oranges, reds, and finally a bright, full daylight. Here on the lakeshore are some rocks where you can sit, and the rocks are warm from the sun's rays. You walk to the largest of the rocks and take a seat on it. It is as if the rock were made just for you to sit on. It cradles your body and holds you steady. And you sit here for a few minutes in silence, listening to the sounds of the water all around you. And your eyes are closed, and your heart is full of joy. In a few minutes, you begin to sense the gentle presence of another being in front of you. You open your eyes, and in front of you, rising from the lake's rippling water, is standing the image of the goddess of the lake, Michi Sihuali. She is magnificent. Her beautiful brown eyes resting on you. She is completely at ease, and so are you. For several minutes you sit enthralled by this beautiful goddess maiden, just looking at you as if she loves you. She is so calm and assured in your presence, and you are so in awe of her presence that your gaze cannot leave hers. It seems that she has brought a message for you from across the lake, and she is sending you that message. Somehow you become aware of the message, and you are ready to receive it. Open your heart now and receive her message. Your heart is filled to overflowing with the love you are feeling in her message. She stands there for a few minutes longer. Then she gently closes her eyes, opens them again for one last look at you, turns, and slowly walks back into the lake. You sit for a moment longer, simply integrating into your being the message she has brought you. And then you rise from your spot on the rock, move gently back onto the path, and walk slowly and calmly back to the edge of the forest where you came from. And with each step you take, you find yourself coming back into your conscious awareness of this room around you. And you begin to notice your surroundings. And you feel the floor under your body. And you slowly move your hands and feet. And now you've returned to complete consciousness. Your message from the lake has been integrated into your being. And you will take that message with you back into your daily life. And so it is. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Today, our presenter, Don Aitken, will give us his 10th annual update on global warming, climate change, and renewable energy. His talk covers the last 2 years, since none was given last year. It looks at global temperature statistics, the apparent effect of climate change during that period, and the continued growth of renewable energy worldwide, as well as in the US and Mexico. Dr. Aitken will also discuss the Paris Agreement and US energy policy as revealed during the first month of President Trump's term. We are indeed fortunate to have an international authority on this subject who lives in Ajijic and has made a huge impact on the use of renewable energy in our community. Dr. Donald Aitken has been a research professor of physics at Stanford University, a 21-year chair of the Department of Environmental Studies at San Jose State University, two-time president of the American Solar Energy Society, three-time director of the National Solar Energy Conferences, and executive director of the U.S. Department of Energy's Western Regional Solar Energy Center. Dr. Aitken developed renewable energy policy that has been adopted by 42 states and the European Union. He received the National Award for Lifetime Service to Solar Energy. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Donald Aitken.
First off, just a quick drink.
I'd rather do that than interrupt the talk. This is the 10th annual, and this is the 11th year. And I wasn't able to do it last year, but I'm back. So it's nice to Thank you. A lot of things are happening right now. I do want to give us the overview of what's happened the last 2 years. And also, I'm an educator. I'm going to be showing you why we have the snowstorms out east and rainstorms out west, and things of that sort. But then I am compelled to go into the political aspect of what's going on. It's been a month now of the Trump administration. They still have not ratified his appointments to Secretary of Energy or Interior, only the Administrator of EPA, so we don't have any actions that have been taken. But I was very lucky to get a hold of a pirated copy of their agenda for the steps that they're going to do. And I need to share that with you. So there'll be more word slides than usual, but we'll intersperse with things to keep your interest level. So let us begin. Starting where I left off in 2014. At that time, they said 2014 was officially the hottest year on record, and until then. So there we are. And I was taken to task. You see, the 2014 global temperature is a little higher than the others. And a very good friend of mine, whose name shall be anonymous, his name is Tom, came up to me and he said, that's really within statistics. You know, they're really overclaiming. Is my voice okay? Can you all hear it everywhere? I hope it's okay. And so what I did is it's the trend that counts. And I noticed 2 years ago that there's what appeared to be a 4-year trend. Well, then we go to 2015. Here's again what we had. Scientists said the most remarkable thing about the record was that it occurred in a year that did not feature a strong El Nino. So I'm going to actually present to you what makes El Ninos and La Ninas and how they fit into all this, the course of it. Anyway, there are the El Nino years, and you can see the El Nino influences the entire world's climate, the entire world's temperature. Well, here are the temperature records now, and now you go to see 2014 below, and now you see 2015 there, and then you go to 2016, and the little trend that I did observe at the beginning turned out to be a very, very real trend that's happening. But there's a real problem with interpreting that 26 data. They've been publications about 2016 is the hottest year ever on record. But we need to look at that a little bit more closely. First, you can see indeed that as we put more and more carbon dioxide into the air, we are warming. And indeed, we really wanted to keep the limit. If you want to only have a 1.5 degree temperature rise for the Earth, you need to keep the limit to 350 parts. See it way down there? And if you want to keep it to 2, you've got to keep it to 400 parts per million. And we have now passed that. You can see that. Now that slide is also December 2010. The same slide that we just saw before. But now look at the end of it. And look at this version too. Indeed, it peaked. But it didn't stay peaked. It's coming down rapidly. And we need to sort of figure out what is going on, and I think it's misleading, that's still in 2016, that you get down that far, and to say 2016 was the warmest year on record. Well, this is another version of the same thing. Here's January, the most recent one I could do, and you can see there's indeed, the world was hotter than it's ever been before, at the peak of the El Nino peak. But now it's coming down, El Nino is over, and now we're going to find out what the real global temperature is. And you can see it's low. So what's going on? El Nino and possibly a new La Nina? And what are they? So let's talk about what these things are. El Nino looks like this. The red is hot, warm water. It's over 1,000 miles long. It's localized, comes out of Ecuador and Peru, and just goes west. Here's another picture of the same thing. It's a massive amount of warm water, enough to change the temperature of the entire Earth. And here's one on the left is in November 97, on the right, November 2015. It's a recurring cycle, and you all know that. Well, let's just take a second to look at what makes the El Nino and the La Nina. And basically it's from the wind direction. And the normal wind on the left goes toward the west. And that's the normal condition where you see the upwelling on the right-hand side, but you don't see a lot of warm water. You do see a lot of warm water, I'm sorry, going over to Asia. The next one you see on the right-hand side is the wind reverses. And when the wind reverses, you can see it bringing the warm water back to this shore. Indeed, the ocean is 0.5 meter higher on the warm side than on the cool side. And so when the wind reverses, that makes the El Nino. And the trade winds then have reversed and in direction, and that returns the warm water to the east, and that makes this long, long puddle of warm water. Another view of the same kind of thing. And still another one that we saw before. It's huge. This motion of moving of the warm water back and forth between continents is enormous. Well, the La Nina is a little bit different. And here we have the normal, the Walker circulation, the wind going to the west, warm water going to the west. And then the cold water is now going that direction, and it's pulling the warm water away. I should have pointed that out. It pulls the warm water away, and it leaves colder water on this side, which makes the La Nina that we have. And usually the La Nina follows the El Nino. So we look at the temperature statistics again, and you can see how heavily influenced they are by the El Ninos and the La Ninas. It's very difficult to figure out an average temperature of the Earth when you have these things going on like this. But it is, in my opinion, misleading to say the average temperature is way up at the top, when in fact, by the end of the year, it's clearly very low. It looks like we have a La Nina starting right now. There is no evidence that global warming affects the El Nino or the La Nina phenomena, but those phenomena do indeed have a definite effect on the global temperature. So they're just natural cycles, but they really do affect the global temperature. All right, let's start looking at two of the great weather things that are now going on, the blizzards out east and the flooding out west, and let's try to understand both. Unprecedented heat off the East Coast is fueling this historic hurricane-force blizzard. By the way, I know you can read all this. I'm deliberately reading it as well to make it a little bit easier for you folks. Winter storms have increased in frequency and intensity since the 1950s, and their tracks have shifted northward over the United States. Weather records show that winter storms are also stronger than they used to be. Winter storms. The extraordinary increase in heat content of the North Atlantic Ocean along the East Coast is providing the energy to make the blizzards for the 3 years into extremely intense and dangerous storms. So there it is, and the darkest area is the warmest water. And you can see the United States on the left, upper left corner. And you can see the warm water, very warm, up to 70 degrees at 300 feet below the surface along the coast of the United States. This is climate change. This is caused by the steady warming of the seas from global warming. People will talk about, oh, it's snowing out here, where did global warming go? It didn't go anywhere. It's right there, making the snowstorms. So skeptics may scoff at the idea that warmer ocean waters may cause heavier snows, but they don't understand how snowstorms work. In midwinter, the Arctic air is cold enough to produce lots of snow if a storm stays offshore, and if it pulls the wedge of Arctic air over that warm water. The warm water evaporates, more vapor into the air than cooler water. It produces a warmer, wetter wedge. That wedge rises up over the cold wedge, it freezes, and it produces more snow than it would have otherwise. That's how we get the great blizzards we're getting now, and they really are quite significant. This is just the current blizzards that they've been having. Connecticut, folks, you Connecticut folks. If you go out to your car, it's an adventure. And trying to get to the car so you can get out of there is an adventure. And in Hartford, Connecticut, kids didn't even bother to go to school because you can't get on the school buses. But the kids love it. You don't go to school, well, you have a wonderful time. This is in Central Park. But these are pictures of the blizzards we're having right now, in early 2017. Extraordinary. The warming North Atlantic Ocean has shortened the winter season in New England, and it's intensified the midwinter storms. These blizzards are becoming an example of the new normal in the age of climate change. Well, let's look at the great rains and floods now in the west that are caused by the atmospheric river phenomenon and the Pineapple Express. Atmospheric rivers are relatively long, narrow regions in the atmosphere. I have pictures to show you. Like rivers in the sky that transport most of the water vapor outside of the tropics. These columns of vapor move with the weather, carrying an amount of water vapor equal to actually about 15 times the average flow of water at the mouth of the Mississippi River. And that's being carried in the air. When the atmospheric rivers make landfall, they often release this water vapor in the form of rain or snow. A well-known example is the Pineapple Express. Those of you who live out west are aware of that. And that's what's going on right now. So there's a picture. There's the Pineapple Express. You can see along the equator we have a lot of activity. We always have a lot of activity there, but it breaks off. And it goes up, and there's the Pineapple Express carrying all that moisture into California. And this is really what's going on. It's that narrow river going up over the mountains, water vapor cooling. It's a primary feature in the entire global water cycle. And on average, about 30 to 50% of the precipitation of the West Coast comes from that. You know, we've had a terrible 4-year drought in California, and all kinds of rationing, and the reservoirs were very, very low, and everything's filled again. So nature has helped out at least at this point. They're about 250 to 375 miles wide, which is not very wide. So here you have the same picture on the bottom. That's a very short river being created. February 6th, you see it start. February 7th, you see it go in. February 8th, it's already over. When you have the short ones, you just have a heavy rain per day. In 1861, an atmospheric river brought storms for 43 days that turned California's Central Valley into an inland sea, 3 miles long and 20 miles wide. Thousands of people died, hundreds of thousands of cattle were dead. All the white areas in California were completely submerged. A great lake in the middle, down by the Mojave. Atmospheric river, this was Sacramento, and the governor, I'm sorry, not the governor, this is the state capital in any case. And it was underwater, that's how people had to get along. So maybe 1861 was an oddity. Not really. Geologic core samples show that extreme floods, like the one in 1861, have happened in California about every 200 years since the year 200 AD. That was 1861. It's been 150 years so far. Who knows how long the present one will go? It's hitting the state again. Every 200 years or so, a catastrophic atmospheric river, many times greater than any Pineapple Express, occurs. Here's another picture of the atmospheric river. It's quite an amazing phenomenon. Another picture, another view, an amazing view of the water vapor in the air, how concentrated it is. And then they had a first International Atmospheric River Conference and used this wonderful slide showing this amazing atmospheric thing. And it keeps coming into California. That's where it ends up. Well, of course, it produces devastating flooding and excessive snow up in the Sierra Nevada. It's totally amazing. The worry about that is if it then gets warm and the snow starts melting and it's still raining and it's still flooded, then you get the severe floods. The ideal thing is that it stays cold up in the mountains and you get the water in the summer. But it's dangerous in the winter. So the rivers certainly fill. And we get flooding all over the state. It's been pretty severe. These are all in January of this year. The ongoing impact of the continuing rain in California and the ongoing impact here at San Jose. I taught at the university, as you mentioned in the introduction, for 21 years. It didn't look like that. And even in Nevada, because they had a burst dam. The dams are overflowing. Many of you saw the information about Oroville Dam, which panicked everybody. And they had to displace 160,000 people, move them in case the dam went. There's no evidence, here we go again, that the atmospheric river phenomenon is affected in any way by climate change. This is also a natural phenomenon. And I'm showing these two things because for people to say, oh, look at all of that rain, look at those atmospheric rivers, that must be from global warming. It's not. And so we have natural conditions that also can do things like that. And we have to be careful what we interpret as being from global warming and what is not from global warming. Anyway, there's your introduction to through the snowstorm and the atmospheric river. Now, climate change will have a huge impact on cities, and let's use Mexico City as an example. It's parched, it's sinking, and it's polluted. It's threatening to push the crowded capital toward a breaking point. Here's the 18th century engraving showing the way it was. As you all know, it was built on an island. The Aztecs built it on an island in the middle of a huge lake. And then gradually, the lake was filled in, which doesn't leave very good foundations. And so now you can see on the bottom, that dark line is the, sorry, let's get back to it, is the aqueduct that they brought in called the Grand Canal. And that's been providing the water for Mexico. And to the right of that, you can see in 1 year, it is sunk 7 inches a year. It's sinking at a rate of 9 inches per year. And what happens is where the aqueduct is, it's going down, but it's gravity fed. Now you're feeding from up there, and then it goes down, and then has to come up. And so they're down to being able to use just 1/4 now of the water in that canal. It's an amazingly quick route. Mexico City, watch this picture. Problems caused by drought and overdrawing from the underlying aquifer. You'll see that as you draw the water table down, everything compresses above it, and the buildings crumple downward. So this is what you have, and this is what you have in Mexico City. So there's a lot happening in a short time in a city with 25 million people. They have to get drinking water. If you have money, this is one way you can get drinking water. They've got a well that goes down to 1,000 feet. And they'll have as many as 100 trucks all standing by that well to fill up. Or you could go down and get water from below and bring it up. It's very laborious. Or you could just worry about it. More heat, in addition, means more air pollution in Mexico City. It aggravates the problem that they already have. Well, that certainly is global warming issues, but also the sinking of Mexico has nothing to do with global warming. But if you find yourself with a city that large out of water, and there's not water nearby that you can bring in, you're going to be in very, very deep trouble and very soon. But what else might be exacerbated by global warming? War. The Defense Department has come out with papers saying that many countries will be destabilized as they have droughts. And Syria is an example. Women working in the fields here, a new report suggests extreme drought in Syria was most likely a factor in the violent uprising that began there in 2011, drawing one of the strongest links yet between global warming and human conflict. In a recent study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the scientists laid the blame for it on a century-long trend toward warmer and drier conditions in the Eastern Mediterranean, rather than on natural climate variability. Look at all the trouble we're having in Syria and how it's spreading over there. And climate change may well have been the trigger for all of it. But the U.S. is safe. We need to know that. So look at our budget. I thought you'd like to see our budget. So we're definitely safe. But of course, we're talking about cutting back on Medicare and Social Security because they're overdriving our budget. So there's the size of Medicare and Social Security. And how about energy and environment? Well, the present administration doesn't want to put money into that. That's how much we put. How about science? That's how much we put into all of the science in the country. How about food and agriculture? That's how much. So we've got the elephant in the closet. And I guess that makes us safe. It's not at all convinced, but it's amazing to see now the set of priorities. And all the priorities that are important for us are on the left. And the priorities for the military is important. We need to be protected. But Trump, of course, plans to add considerably to that budget by cutting back on some of the other things. Let's talk about the Paris Climate Convention, the climate agreement. That was a very important thing that happened in 2016, last year. It's an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, mitigation, adaptation, and finance, starting in the year 2020. The language of the agreement was negotiated by representatives of 195 countries at the 21st Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Committee in Paris and adopted by consensus on the 12th of December 2015. Open for signature on the 22nd of April, which is Earth Day. In 2016, at a ceremony, and as of the end of 2016, 194 members have signed and 132 have ratified. And that's what it looks like. So the parties of the 194 countries that signed the agreement, the signatories of the 132 countries that have ratified their participation. This was truly a great global effort. Will it work? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. The primary aim was to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees C, above pre-industrial levels, and to try to have efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees C. We're way, way beyond that with carbon dioxide now and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. All goals are set by each of the countries. Adherence to the goals is voluntary with no mechanisms for enforcement. So we can add up the total amount of goals that was adopted in this great conference, and you get only half as much reduction as you need to stay below 2 degrees C. So even though it was important and it will slow the warming, well, they're not being as aggressive as they need to be. Here are the heads of the country delegations. And this, I miss the guy. It's amazing because that handshake covers 40% of all of the greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. China and the US, and it was historic that China came into it and that we have this historic agreement between the two countries. First time ever for China. And it was fun. The Eiffel Tower had this going on, action now, 1.5 degrees for the planet. It was quite an occasion. But this is amazing. Everything you see in that picture, other than the Eiffel Tower, are human beings. Those are people all standing, making the peace symbol. Those are people lying down on the sand, making the 100% renewable sign, because they felt that they really did not pay enough attention to fostering renewable energy as a primary mechanism in the Paris Agreement. I think this is remarkable. Well, now we're going to move to the Trump energy and environment agenda, insofar as we can figure it out at this time. And we have to start with the people who will carry it out. His appointments for Secretaries of Energy in the Department of Interior and the administration of the EPA, 549 key positions in his administration need Senate confirmation. So far, he's filled 14. We're now in the second month of his term. Here are the three most important for energy and the environment. Only one has been confirmed. That was EPA. So here we are. Energy is Rick Perry from Texas, Interior Ryan Zinke, and EPA is Scott Pruitt from Oklahoma. So let's look at these. For Department of Energy, his pick was the former Texas governor, Rick Perry. He had experience in energy-rich Texas, which seemed to make it a fit, but actually it's more of a national security agency. He said, when he was in Texas, he said, I want to get rid of the Department of Energy, forgetting that 70% of the budget of the Department of Energy is the entire nuclear budget in the United States. All of the research, the creation of the weapons, the storing of the weapons, everything, that's 70% of his budget. He didn't know that when he made his comment. Okay. Oh, I like that line. The last two energy secretaries were award-winning scientists. Yes, indeed. His liability is that, oops, as they undoubtedly remind the public with great glee, the Energy Department was a cabinet post that he forgot that he wanted to eliminate during the Republican primary debate in 2011. He mentioned two others he wanted to eliminate, and then, he couldn't remember. It was the Department of Energy, which he now heads. Okay. The mocking will quickly turn serious as senators force Perry to explain how he plans to lead a department that he doesn't believe should exist. They still haven't held those hearings, waiting confirmation. So let's go to the Department of Interior. Trump's pick is Representative Ryan Zinke of Montana. In Congress, he opposed the sale of federal lands, but supported mining and drilling on them. He had time in Congress and the military. Environmentalists immediately denounced it, citing his support for mining and drilling and his skepticism about climate change. He's awaiting confirmation as well. And then we go to the real baddie, and he's already in. He's been approved by the Senate. Scott Pruitt, 6 years as the Oklahoma Attorney General, 8 years in the state Senate. In that Attorney General position, he led the conservative legal fight. He led the conservative legal fight against the Obama administration's agenda to combat climate change. He led that. He sued to stop the administration's climate rules. Like Trump, he's voiced doubts about the science behind climate change and its connection to man-made activities. The new head of EPA. Well, Democratic leaders have made him one of their top targets, one of their nominees, warning his views on climate change are extreme. His confirmation would ensure the dismantling of the Obama-era regulatory regime. Too late. Didn't work. He was confirmed by the Senate on February 20, and people in the EPA are just panicked. Wonderful, dedicated employees. Well, we shouldn't be surprised by these kind of appointments. Leslie, thank you for this. Just a couple of days ago, it appeared in the newspaper that Bannon had been talking to this meeting of the ultra-conservatives, and he said to them that Trump's cabinet nominees were not selected to run their departments. They were selected to dismantle their agencies. That was the criteria for selecting these people. And they've done a very good job of doing that. It's scary. Now, I can't tell you any more. This time next year, we will know a whole lot. But what I can tell you now is what is their agenda? Energy and environment agenda. And it's really important, insofar as we can figure it out. A December 8, 2016 memo, which was obtained by the Center for Media and Democracy, outlined his energy agenda, revealed the full extent to which he's going to lay waste to America's climate record and clean energy industry. Now, I realize that there are Trump supporters in here, I'm sure, and this is all from Trump, so I'm not making too much of opinion on this. Okay? Highlighted as key aspects of his energy agenda is the promise to hit the reset on the most harmful parts of the Obama climate agenda, including the Paris Agreement and the so-called Clean Power Plan. I'll tell you what those are. The statements on the campaign trail indicate that they will focus, now here are the main policies. Policy number 1, withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. He's promised to cancel the agreement, stop spending taxpayer dollars on wasteful UN climate programs. Even if the Trump administration does nothing, this means that there will be massive defections from the agreement by other countries. You're saying, if the United States is in it, then our contribution doesn't mean anything. It's been very interesting that Ivanka and Jared, his son-in-law are really opposed to the policy of withdrawing from Paris. And Trump was going to come out with a executive order, and those two relatives, those two people took the words out of that, withdrawing from Paris. So within the family, there's still some disagreement, which is good. Here's another one, increasing federal oil and natural gas leasing. That means that in the Alaskan areas and seas and the mid and south Atlantic, the National Petroleum Preserve, Alaska, and on federal lands in the west, all over the place. Lifting the coal lease moratorium. The Obama administration's moratorium on federal lands, a part of their keep it in the ground strategy, will be terminated. expediting approvals of liquefied natural gas export terminals. And I want you to note the word for export, because we're going to show some pictures of the pipeline issues and come back to the export. So he wants more of those built. Okay? Hitting reset on the clean power plan. This is the plan to dramatically reduce. I think my watch stopped, but it's... this is the plan to dramatically reduce CO2 emissions from existing power plants, called the Clean Power Plan. The Trump administration will issue a new regulation withdrawing the Clean Power Plan. Also, the regulation of carbon dioxide emissions from new power plants will also be withdrawn. So back to coal, back to great emissions. Reconsidering the endangerment finding. The Obama administration found that greenhouse gas emissions harmed human health and welfare. This finding will be reconsidered and probably revoked, marking a major blow to the underpinning for many climate regulations, which includes the automobile and truck efficiency standards. Moving forward with pipeline infrastructure. Well, these are real issues, and I want to show you. This will mean approval of the Keystone and Dakota pipelines, despite great public opposition. Trump already signed orders on January 24th, 3 days after his inauguration, to advance both pipelines. So let's do some education in this. The Keystone is certainly very, very unpopular. The demonstrations continue. Well, there's the Keystone pipeline going from Canada all the way down to the coast. And the dashed area is the new pipeline that they want to do. They have an existing pipeline, which, I don't have a pointer, so I can't help you, but which delivers shale oil all the way into Illinois, Patoka. But they want to deliver much, much more, so they have to build another pipeline to be able to carry that amount. Okay, well, this is what's going on. Now, we talk about the Keystone Pipeline as being good for American independence, energy independence. No. The Canadians want it so they can go down to the port, and there's the word exports. The oil that goes down, some of it will be refined, is to be exported to China, Latin America, Europe. So the Keystone Pipeline doesn't do anything at all for the U.S. It's got nothing to do with energy independence. So one might argue if there were no problems. Well, if it doesn't cause any harm, and it's a good thing to do for our Canadian neighbors, and if it's good for their economy, okay. Except the development of the tar sands is not okay, and produces an enormous amount of waste, water problems, and carbon dioxide and other things going into the air. And that was the grounds, actually, that Obama rejected it. Well, at the bottom, it's going to go through these with these. That's why he wants more terminals. Okay? Now, looking at this again, if you look at the place where it says the Sand Hills and the Ogallala Aquifer, that was the source of the environmental problems. So here's a more detailed one. The Ogallala Aquifer is the largest aquifer in the United States. It's being heavily overdrawn right now to grow corn, and largely that corn is for fuel. And they're worried that a pipeline break, if it possibly leaked into the Ogallala, wow, it'd be absolutely terrible. Well, I'm involved in that a little bit. I have an organic wheat farm, which I inherited, and that's where it is, in that corner of Nebraska. And we don't use water from the Ogallala. It's called dry land farming. We use only rain, which means for 2 years in a row with a drought, I got no crops, but it doesn't take water from underground. Well, then what they did is I can't point here, they proposed a newly approved route, and it was, which then skirts the Sand Hills and skirts the Ogallala. So that did help. And here's kind of a picture then also the proximity to tribal lands. And the tribal lands are not especially interested are excited by having it go next to them or through them. Well, this is what Obama did. The pipeline that he supported is the orange one on the bottom. Doggone it. I'm sorry, I keep touching things here which I shouldn't touch. The orange on the bottom was approved by Obama, but the blue one was not approved. Okay, well, here we go. Awful lot of people are very, very concerned. It has been approved by the president. Already they're starting construction. On we go. But now we have the other pipeline issue. That's the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's 1,172 miles from the Bakken Shale oil fields in North Dakota to Patoka, Illinois. It is complete. They're finished. They've done it. Except where it crosses the Lake Oahe in North Dakota. Dakota. I see it, by the way. Okay. So there's the protest site for this as it crosses the lake. There have been large protests at the lake crossing over potential water contamination and the damage of sacred tribal sites. The Missouri River is the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's primary source of drinking water. Well, here in even more detail, you can see where it's going to cross underground in the river, so it'll cross below the water, below the ground, then come up. And the protest site is to one side where they found sacred burial sites right on the pipeline route. And you can see other sacred sins, Sacred Stone Overflow Camp and the Standing Rock Reservation. Well, here's the end of the Dakota pipeline story 3 days ago. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday. Okay? A backhoe rips through a wood structure to begin the cleaning up process of the camp as law enforcement swept through the camp on February 23rd, arresting 45 of the Dakota Native Americans. I'm sorry for that pipeline. And they injured several. The Dakota pipeline is now expected to be completed in the next 3 weeks. The issue is over. We have 45 in jail. We have places where they lived torn down. Well, they came to San Francisco. That's on the right-hand side is our civic center and headquarters of the government for California. And they held this demonstration for protecting the Dakota pipeline, the Dakota Indians. It didn't work. The power of the government and the oil and energy lobbies over the people is too much. Now, I know this is not a nice picture, but you get a sense how much he cares about these issues. The Trump energy agenda, as far as we know it, taking a closer look at the environmental impacts of wind energy. That's another one he wants to do. He's been concerned about the harms to wildlife from wind turbines, such as birds, bird deaths, and bat deaths. Well, for each bird killed by wind turbines, cats kill 10,000. Building collisions, 2,500. Cars, 800. Power lines, 300. In other words, that's what he's worried about and thinks maybe we shouldn't have wind turbines because of what it's doing for the birds. Well, really, those of you who love cats, the first thing is get rid of all the cats. And then building windows, what can you do about them? Build new buildings without windows. Yeah, right. Because the birds see their reflection. They slam into it. Automobiles, we can start walking, start driving cars or something. Power lines, we got to add that. No. It's totally ridiculous. It's a red herring, totally ridiculous. A Trump-owned hotel stands in Manhattan, one of the tall U.S. buildings that kills 2,500 times more birds than wind turbines. Okay, another one. Reducing energy subsidies. These are still his policies. Oh yeah. All subsidies should end so that the demand for energy will set prices, he stated. Wind and solar energy, Trump said, are very expensive, and they can't work without massive subsidies. Well, a 2016 study estimated that global fossil fuels subsidies were $5.3 trillion in 2015. Global renewable energy subsidies reached $88 billion, or 0.17% of the subsidies for fossil fuels. Why do you have to subsidize it? According to the International Energy Agency, the elimination of fossil fuel subsidies worldwide is the most effective ways of reducing greenhouse gases and battling global warming. In May of 2016, the G7 nations set for the first time a deadline of 2025 for ending most fossil fuel subsidies in all countries around the world, saying government support for coal, oil, and gas should end. Oh yeah, give renewables a chance. In 2000, over 90%, oh, there's another one. This is amending the renewable fuel standard. 2000, over 90% of the U.S. corn crop went to feed people and livestock. In 2013, 40% went to produce ethanol. 45% was used to feed livestock, only 15% for food and beverage. They're going crazy. It's a very, very bad program. And most of it's being grown in the Midwestern area, including Nebraska, where I have the farm. And they're digging the water out of the, corn is a very water-intensive crop. And they're taking the water out of the aquifer. Amending the renewable fuel standard. Trump likes it to increase domestic energy production. He likes that. He wants to end the EPA's discretionary authority to cap the amount of corn used for fuel, thus assuring that this water-intensive crop will continue to compete with food and drain aquifers. And you know what else it's done? Mexico imports a great deal of corn to make their tortillas. It has raised the price of the corn and raised the price of the tortillas here in Mexico because we use corn to make fuel in the United States. Relaxing the federal fuel economy standards. Oh my. The CAFE standards for light-duty vehicles must achieve 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. This fuel-saving and CO2 reducing regulation will either be completely withdrawn or phased out. Ending the use of the social cost of carbon in federal rulemaking, the social cost, the impact on welfare, economies, and people. The Obama administration used it to help justify the regulations. Well, at this point, I'm not over. But that, dear friends, provides the science, the personnel, and the legal basis for what we have to look forward to this next year in the areas of global warming, climate change, and renewable energy. All we know is there are the policies laid out. Now we have to see what happens. We have a very rough road ahead, and we are entering dangerous times. The doomsday clock moves closer to midnight, signaling concern among scientists. Members of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists who operate this famous clock have advanced it to 2.5 minutes before midnight. On January 26th, it's just a symbolic thing. When the Earth is facing imminent disaster, they move its minute hand from 3 to 2.5 minutes before the final hour. Midnight is presumably when we have the all-time disaster. It's the closest the clock had been to midnight since 1953, the year after the United States and the Soviet Union conducted competing tests of the hydrogen bomb. Boy, I remember that. And many of you remember that. We were scared. We were all really scared at that time. We all really expected a nuclear conflagration. We were young. 1953? I was in high school, a junior in high school. Never before has the Bulletin decided to advance the clock largely because of the statements of a single person. But when that person is the new president of the United States, his words matter and give us more danger. Let's end on an upnote, whatever you want to call it. I don't like to end negatively. So we're going to talk about renewable energy continuing to grow. And we're going to talk about how the states are going to continue to lead regardless of whatever Trump does. Renewable energy became the world's dominant new installed energy in 2013. The world is now adding more capacity for renewable power, which is sun, wind, biomass, geothermal, okay? More capacity for renewable power than coal, natural gas, and oil combined. For people who worry about whether the renewable energy will ever really be able to make it economically, able to really produce enough for the societies, look at these statistics. The shift occurred in 2013 when the world added 143 gigawatts, that's equivalent to the output of 143 nuclear plants, or equivalent to the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365 days a year output of 40 nuclear power plants, while they did less with plants that burn fossil fuel. So here's a fascinating, fascinating slide. All the colored things on the right are the forecast for the amount of clean energy that the world is going to be implementing. And on the left is the amount of fossil fuel they're going to use to make electricity. And these are the world plans. The blue on the bottom is wind, and the orange in the middle is solar. So for people who think that solar is too expensive, it can't compete with other things, oh my goodness. It's going to be the dominant world energy source. Well, the share of capacity additions by generation source in the United States, it was the first year in 2016 in which more solar energy was installed in the United States than any other resources. So 39% of the new resources to make electricity in the United States in 2016 were solar. 26% was wind. So the two together made up 65% of all new energy capacity additions in the US. Only 29% was natural gas. So again, you must believe now that these are fully mature, large-scale technologies ready and entering into the economies of the developed nations. Projections to 2040 for the world. New installations of renewables versus fossil fuels. 65% of the actual amount of energy, that's huge, and 66% of the $12.2 trillion that will be spent on new resources are all going to be on renewable energy. On the top for solar, 3,429 gigawatts, that's equivalent to 3,400, the rating of 3,429 nuclear plants. And you can divide that by 4 for an average capacity factor at the time when the sun shines, makes electricity. When it doesn't shine, it doesn't. You have a balance between solar and wind, because wind blows when the sun is not shining. You have geothermal to come in and stabilize those things. You have biomass coming in to stabilize those things. But that still represents an enormous amount. About 800 power output, 24 hours a day of 800 nuclear power plants. Okay, US solar PV installations. Look how fast it's been growing. But let's come back home. The growth in the number of solar houses in Ajijic Lakeside has been amazing. I quit counting at 24. We knew we hit 1,000. We know we're way above that right now. That's quite amazing. On a measure of installed solar energy per capita, Ajijic and Chapala Lakeside area is now the solar capital of the entire country of Mexico. So, financially, what P and I paid for this is my house. The house is in the background. My little office casita is in the foreground. It looks big because of the way we took the picture. There's a little solar row on the top. That one row of solar gives me 85 to 90% of all my electricity for my house, for my offices, refrigerators, everything. But it was terribly expensive. So we brought money down from the US and we ended up doing solar house number 1 in this area. And then we had, I gave talks, and we had people visit the house and it began to take off. But what you're paying today is $7,000, and what we paid was $17,000. Big difference, folks. Will all of the solar home owners here at this talk please stand up and be acknowledged? Wow. heroes. Now, on climate change, when all of these bad policies are going into effect, the states can still continue to do what they want to do, and they will serve as an important bulwark against any attempt by Trump to roll back the progress the U.S. has made in addressing climate change. That is good news for the planet. Between 2000 and 2014, 33 states and the District of Columbia cut carbon emissions while expanding their economies. Yes, we're told, gosh, you cut carbon emissions, you're going to spend money to do that, you're going to really hurt the economy. 33 states are proving that exactly the opposite is true. That is a false argument. The list includes red states run by Republican legislatures like Alaska, Georgia, Tennessee, and West Virginia. They're enhancing their economies by cutting carbon emissions. In some states, including Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, Nebraska, and parts of Texas, new wind turbines can generate electricity at a lower cost without subsidies than any other technology. They're really advanced worldwide now. They are the cheapest. And you can do it both on land and in sea. But the others are coming down, and in the southwestern United States, solar is now cheaper than coal. So no matter how much the Trump administration wants to promote coal, which is what they want to do, the utilities are not dumb. They're going to buy what's the cheapest. And the utilities are driving these large renewable energy fields and farms now. So it doesn't matter whether the administration says we want to have coal. Lots more jobs in renewable energy. There are 250,000 jobs in renewable energy. In the U.S., there's 85,000 jobs in the coal industry in the U.S. And these are big, giant, giant things. Mexico's wind power goals. The Mexican government set a goal of producing 35% of its energy from clean energy sources by 2024. The investment to date is $6 billion, and they've got the 1,400 wind turbines, but they've had them for quite a while. They're down in Oaxaca. They're on the straits of the Isthmus down there. Predictions for future investments are more than $12 billion USD by 2018. The next 2 years in Mexico are therefore in for huge growth in this sector. Knock on wood. Okay. Lawmakers, environmental groups, and individuals who care about climate change ought to fight every effort to take the country backward on this issue. But it will be just as important for them to support states that are trying to advance the cause. Schwarzenegger, a Republican, was governor of California, and when he came in, he did more than any Democratic governor had ever done to promote the renewable energy industries and solar in California. He was then followed by the amazing Jerry Brown, who is now in his 4th term in California. And Jerry Brown has set goals of 50% of our energy from renewables by 2040. And he's actually taken on Trump. He has to be a little careful. He's just doing that. And California can do what they want to do. And Trump had said, okay, if you're going to do that, no more federal funds into the state. And that actually is worrisome, because a lot of federal funds do an awful lot for education in a lot of fields. And if he begins to use that as a weapon against good programs, that will be scary. But thank goodness for Schwarzenegger first and then Jerry. So these are the sort of things being built in California now. Giant solar farms, different kinds of giant solar farms, yet a different kind of giant solar farms, all being built in California. And yet, we have a challenge, because China is now the world's leader in solar energy. So they know what they're doing now about this. We're like timid farmers chopping down the fence around our house for fuel, when we should be using nature's inexhaustible sources of energy, sun, wind, and tide. I put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that Thomas Edison 1931. We have about 100 years of fossil fuels left. We got about 5.5 trillion years of billion years of sunshine left. So choose wisely. Thank you all.
Now we have time for questions. So hang on to your microphone. And the rest of you who would like to stay, have some questions, you can line up behind this or that microphone and we'll take them one by one for the time that we have. Thank you.
Can I blow you out with all
Don't be-
those statistics? No
Don't be
questions?
shy.
There's one there. Is that mic on? Hold on. I don't think the mic is on. And turn it down.
Okay. I was wondering if you're taking this slideshow and talk in the U.S. I live in Washington and they're very, very progressive, but it's a wonderful talk and slideshow, and I feel like it should be shown all over the U.S. We have too many naysayers.
Thank you. We've got two photographers here who are taking, we're going to make a DVD. People tend to say that each year of my talks. I might mention that I've never been a demonstrator. I haven't wanted to march. But now the time has come, and I'll be in the Scientists' March in Washington.
Next question.
Hi, Dee Dee.
Hi. As the program chair for Democrats Abroad, we will be featuring Don in another discussion on this topic. But what we're going to do is ask him specific questions. What can we do as individuals here in Mexico City to influence our state representatives? So the meeting is on, I think it's May
23rd.
No,
No, I got it wrong. 13th?
it's on May 13th, and it is at the La Bodega restaurant. We start at 3:30 for botanas, and at 4 o'clock our session starts. And we have been getting a lot of press, and so we're seeing about 50, 60, 70 people to attend. So I invite everyone. You do not have to be a member. Everyone. You do not have to be a member of Democrats Abroad in order to come. May 13th at the La Bodega restaurant on 16th de Septiembre, 3:30 in the afternoon. I look forward to seeing you all.
I guess I better be there.
Hi, would you explain why the Keystone Pipeline is running south through the U.S. rather than going west to the shores of Canada? A shorter route.
There is an answer to that. It's largely because of all the refineries. They go right straight into the refineries. Many of the countries, including Mexico, buy refined oil. They buy gasoline and the other things. And so they are expecting to be able to use the refinery. And then it's a wonderful location for the ships to come in and fill up with the natural gas. Well, they're highly pressurized natural gas. And then they can go to several routes as well. West coast of Canada really can't deliver this stuff to China very conveniently, whereas from down there you can. That's why.
Thanks.
Yeah, Don, Andy Money. This week, the United States Secretary of State met with Mexico, and I think he just left. So, do you think that they might have talked about Pemex, their energy woes, and so on, and refinery? You think that might be, was a topic of discussion while they were here this week, in spite of the wall and all the other nonsense?
Well, I'm aware when they came out for the press to take pictures, they all had very glum faces. And that was noted. I can't know what they talked about. I thought it was very positive because of all the awful slamming of Mexico that's coming from the White House, that they sent the Secretary of State down right away, sent 2 high-level people to talk, which is what you want to do. And one can hope that the talks are productive, that there is some evidence that Trump's really strong statements are not going to be followed, that they're going to be tempered, even on Obamacare. That the evidence is that Obamacare will be tweaked but not removed. And I'm afraid I can't tell you what they might have talked about, but we can only hope that it was positive. Rubino.
Don, I think all of us are so grateful for this incredible talk. The knowledge, the way you do it, our society should be really grateful. You talked about, I think, Mexico's commitment to wind energy. What about their commitment to solar energy? I mean, this is the sunniest country in the world. Why is Mexico not showing more commitment to solar energy? Or am I wrong that they're not?
It was largely because my talk had gotten long enough. Mexico has the 3rd largest output for solar and opportunity to use solar in the world. They have changed the rules some. And what they've done is, you know, your houses, when you have solar on the roof, you're connected to the utility. Well, they now allow large ones to be connected to the utility. So industries, we have very expensive electricity in Mexico. And so industries are now finding in Mexico that they can make large solar arrays that they pay for, which will reduce their energy costs. And they have to be, CFE has to take them connected to the power line so they have the same trade back and forth that we do in our homes. So there have been a number of significant advances. And a friend of mine, a Mexican, who's part of a group called the Solar Circle that I belong to, and he gave a wonderful talk. And I asked him for the slides so I could put it in, and we could never quite figure out how to get the slides. Why this is ringing into my computer. So I'm afraid next year there will be an emphasis on solar as well as other updates. But it is moving. Definitely it's moving. And the utilities also in Mexico are now beginning to build large solar arrays. And Phil, I appreciate your bringing that up.
Hi, I was interested.
I turned mine off.
Yeah, I was interested in your talk about the atmospheric rivers, and you didn't mention anything about the melting of the Arctic ice cap. And I was wondering if those atmospheric rivers have anything to do with the melting of the ice cap, the Arctic ice cap.
It's a good question. No, the rivers end up in California. They don't go north. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in Greenland and in the Arctic North, and of course in the Antarctic area in the south. Previous years I've talked more about it. There's a huge ice shelf, the so-called Larsen Sea, as big as Rhode Island, that is now in the process of breaking off from Greenland. The thing about the ice shelves is they float, so it doesn't add more water, just ice floating on the water. But it removes the dam for the glaciers behind it, so the glaciers begin to move faster. And so there is a great deal of activity going on, and I apologize, couldn't do more than I just said. Wait till next year. Oh,
Aitken. A significant limitation on the use of solar and wind energy is the lack of continuity of supply. Therefore, a base capacity has to be maintained. Is there any advancement in large-scale energy storage methods?
I'm really sorry that I did not get to your question. I apologize.
is there any advancement in large-scale electrical energy storage methods? Because the lack of continuity of solar and wind supply.
Yeah, there's a lot of work, a great deal of work being done on storage right now, which also helps level the energy output for the utilities themselves. But Monk, the developer of the wonderful electric cars, Elon Musk. And he has already built an enormous storage area with his batteries, because he built an enormous plant to make the batteries as well. And they plugged it into the utility, and it really helps. So yes, what we need, but how much storage you need? I mean, people say, well, you don't have sun, and so on. I mentioned before, if the average energy you get from solar is about 25% of the time, the average energy you get from wind is about 30 to 40% of the time by putting them in good areas. If you plug both of those, the wind farm and the solar, together into the same power line, you get 85% of your load because they balance each other. So at most you need 15% backup, natural gas or whatever you would use. But if you've got geothermal, there's your backup. I didn't put Mexico in here this time. The last 2-3 years, I presented my plan for 100% renewable energy conversion for Mexico. I divided Mexico into 10 regions. Each of those regions could be energy independent based just on their renewables. Because each region has got a backup of biomass or geothermal or something. Every region has got solar, regions have got wind. Mexico has an amazing opportunity to go 100% renewable without backup. And Germany has a plan for that. A real plan. The same thing, Germany. Who's next?
I'm curious about your opinion on whether there's any hope
Closer to the mic, please.
I'm curious about your opinion on whether there's any hope of not only halting but actually actively reversing the effects of climate change.
Well, I can't just be a pessimist here, but we're still loading up the atmosphere. And the plan is to at least try to stop increasing and to stabilize it. And yes, once you stabilize it, and once you have developed then the clean energy industry, you saw how much solar is going to develop now in the future, then you can expect it to come down. But the problem is what we have in the atmosphere right now will stay there for 200 years. It has a very, very long lifetime in the atmosphere. So even if we slow the increase, which is what we have to do, it'll be quite a while before we will be below some level. And that's not going to be 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees. It's going to be very, very exciting. But they all are aiming. The first thing to do is to stop the increase. And now even where my hand is, we're still putting a lot of CO2 in the air, right? And then the next thing is to start bringing it down. Yes, there's hope, but on a very long time scale. I appreciate your question. I'll repeat the question.
Yeah. Piggyback off of that gentleman's question regarding climate change. My question is, and perhaps you did touch on it, and maybe also in the years prior, but specifically in this area, the Lake Chapala area, okay, and it's a very unique area, being the second best climate. How do you see climate change impacting this particular area? The short version, if you want to do that.
Short version. Oh, have I ever given the short version? All right. We're in an extremely fortunate area. If you look at the time when we have our rainy season, that the rain breaks off almost like an atmospheric river and comes up and crosses where we are. It's like a very large and wide atmospheric river that is repeated every winter coming off of all the storms that they have in the equatorial area. And that has nothing to do with climate change, so we can hope that that will continue. But the great worry is all the models show northern Mexico getting incredibly dry and huge droughts, and some of those models show it coming down into this area. But right now, we are really very, very fortunate where we live on possibly not having the worst problems from climate change.
I'm here to defend the northern tar sands as nature had them before, and that is that the vegetation grew above them, and the only use made of the tar sands was pitch by the natives to seal up their canoes. Now, what I'm doing is I'm defending the, shall we say, the people.
Defending whom?
The people who want discipline and to continue to work fast for saving our climate. And that means all of our politicians have to ask for more discipline, including the World Health, including, yes, the World Health Organization, United Nations. Because, yes, I'm going to terminate by saying it's not the people of Canada who are abolishing, who are asking for the sale of oil. It's the big industries. There's some Caterpillar and all the big ones who go to their representatives and say, oh, please help us.
Well, really that's a comment, and I think you're correct. One more. Well, Dan,
yes,
that's you.
Dr. Aitken, could you comment a little bit more about the form the subsidies take that flow from the government into the fossil fuel industry? What is this?
They're largely tax benefits, huge tax benefits. All the oil that you find in the ground, then you can write off, even though you haven't dug it out of the ground yet, the tax benefits for just about everything else that they are doing. So it is largely in the form of benefits that otherwise the government would get that money if they did not have those benefits. There are more than that. There are many, many more, but that's the primary thing standing. Okay.
Thanks all of you for coming, and we hope to see you next week at the usual place.